All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Brian Kenny, and I'm going to introduce our And One podcast. This is our first episode, and we're super excited to be with a very young official who we're pretty excited to talk to. The whole reason why we started this podcast was so that we could talk to people in the business about anything and everything related to officiating. So we decided to call it the N1 podcast because everybody knows that an N1 is a part of basketball. It's something that you're going to see. It's going to happen. And it's oftentimes a very exhilarating event, especially if you're the recipient of the N1. Not so much for the official, but we thought that would be a really cool name for the episodes, and we actually have a logo that at some point we'll unveil. So I'm going to let Kent talk about the goals of our episodes.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Kent Meehee. I'm an official from Darlington, Wisconsin, and helping Brian out with our podcast. I'm excited about this because hopefully these podcasts give our listeners a little different perspective on what goes into officiating. People that listen to this or who have been to games, they've probably reacted to a call during a game in a negative way, and you associate a call with the person. So if a call is bad, the person must be bad, but you never get the other side of what officials go through and what they think and what they see and what they do to get better. Because like you said, Brian, this is a business, and people who spend a lot of time and effort in officiating, they do a lot of stuff to get better and so that the games go well, and they want to do a good job when they get on the floor. So hopefully, that's kind of the goal of why we started this podcast, is for officials and, parents, coaches, anybody, to get a different perspective on what officiating is all about.
Yeah. And, Kent and I are both part of the Wisconsin River Officials Association, the WROA, and the idea to launch this podcast came from our membership. So not only is the Wisconsin River Officials Association kind of the backbone of the podcast, but then we actually created a name for the podcast and we called it the N1 podcast. So again, I'm Brian Kenny. I'm from Wisconsin Dells. I've been officiating high school basketball for about 30 years. At this point in my career, I'm solely interested in growing a talent pool and a pipeline. And I really enjoy helping young people be successful. And I think it's fitting that we're going to be interviewing a young official today and talking to him about how he's climbing the ladder. And I've been pretty fortunate to have climbed that ladder. And now I want to help someone else.
And I think it's unique too, Brian, that this is our pilot episode, and you can explain the irony behind our first guest.
Kent, you are a man of many jokes.
I did think of that as we were just starting. Like, oh, this is perfect.
So Rory Schultz is our guest today, and he is going to school to be a pilot. Hence a little bit of Kent's humor. Rory will get us off the ground with this episode. Rory's living in Oshkosh, Wisconsin right now, and he's studying aviation at Foss Valley Technical College. Outside of aviation, he enjoys officiating, golfing, spending time with friends, and working out. So, Rory, welcome.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
Oh, no problem. We're always excited to, when you do the first of anything, you want it to be really good. And we couldn't think of anything better than for us to interview a young official. And because there's such a shortage of young officials, we need to embrace that and highlight the success and the opportunities that are available and how excited you are about being a young official and the things that you're doing that are very euphoric. Officiating is euphoric. It's exciting. It's exhilarating. You're you should be energized. And so I think that's pretty awesome that we're able to do that. So Kent.
Yeah, I'll get us rolling with the first question. So Rory, how did you first get started into officiating? So like, was there a person, like a mentor that asked you to get into it, or was it your own interest that got you started with it? So how did officiating begin for you?
Well, I'd say initially my hand was kind of forced into a basket. I was in class in 8th grade, and the principal actually came in and grabbed me and pulled me out in the hallway, and I thought I was in trouble. But nope, sure enough, she goes, one of our officials dropped out for tonight. We've got 5th and 6th grade girls game and then a 7th and 8th grade girls game after. Do you want to do it? I say, yeah, I'll do it. I think I blew my whistle 2 or 3 times between the 2 games. You know, I was there was a lot of knowledge that still needed to come, but that's what got my feet wet. After that, our assistant varsity basketball coach, Colton Wilson, he's the JV coach at Richland Center for boys. He gave me the opportunity when I was in high school to work Saturday tournaments, youth tournaments, anywhere from 4th to 8th grade boys and girls, and started falling in love with it after that. I started really looking into the game, watching YouTube videos on the game, trying to learn and be the best I could be. So Colton Wilson was probably who got me into it the most.
I think that's unique too, that you started off not only so young, but you started off reffing. You probably reffed your classmates then, right?
Yeah, I was reffing my classmates. So lunch was a little different the next day. Let's put it that way.
So
go ahead, Brian.
So Rory, what officiating sometimes has a lot of different concepts and terminology. What concept right now with officiating is the hardest one for you to grasp? You know, now you're getting the chance to work with some people that are giving you feedback about your game, and you're getting pushed maybe out of your comfort zone a little bit. You're being challenged. So, you know, what's that thing that stands out for you?
At this moment, are you asking, or are you asking?
Yeah, just right. You're doing some varsity games now. You're seeing a lot of plays. You're seeing, you know, boys games, girls games. Is there a particular situation or some play or skill that's been difficult for you?
I'd say coming from working a lot of 2-person to 3-person, you got different lines, you got different PCAs. And I've worked a lot of AAU games, a lot of club games where a lot of the officials don't have good mechanics. Kind of just there for, I don't want to say they're there for a check, but sometimes it ends up being that. But with the reffing shortage we're in, that's kind of what it comes down to. So I'd say hardest right now, I'm working with a lot of different crews this year. I'm basically just filling in wherever people need filled in. So every crew seems to do stuff a little differently, which, if everyone followed the book exactly how it was supposed to be done, we wouldn't have that issue, but that's how it goes. So I'd say probably the hardest skill right now is PCA and not going outside of it for stuff that I shouldn't be going outside of it for. And then just working with different people have different ways of doing stuff. So, yeah.
We had a game last night, and we talked about when you come out of your, for our listeners that don't know PCA, that's okay. I love that you use that acronym, because primary coverage area. We talked about if you come out of your primary or your secondary into someone else's primary, you need to come out for sharks, not minnows. And we talked about this last night. It was 3 veterans, 3 good veteran officials, and we had great conversation about a particular play that involved an and one. No irony there to the name of the podcast. And we didn't feel like it was a quality and one. And we had to have a very courageous conversation about, because you have 2 choices: take that personally or take it to heart, right? You're right. I should have had a more patient whistle on that play, and I probably would have disappeared with no whistle. And we just left it at having a great conversation and that's the best part of officiating, right? Is talking about difficult scenarios, because they're not going to go away. And you're being exposed to that now by being a varsity official. And how old are you, Rory?
I'm 19 years old. I turned 20 in February.
Okay. That's awesome. You're on your way. So keep up the good work.
I'm glad Rory brought that up too, because that's another thing that people might not realize is that there's 3 officials on the floor, and every official has a specific area to watch depending on where they're standing. And like you said, Brian, everybody is watching the ball, but every official is watching their area and what goes on in that area. So when Rory's talking about, the difficulty of that, your area is always changing and there's always different things going on at different times. So, for our listeners, hopefully that can give some background that we're not just out there watching the same game you are. We're watching a totally different game. And the guys you're working with, Rory, they're very good officials, and you got good mentors to improve on that. So with that being kind of your challenge, your next goal to kind of focus on, what part of getting started and starting doing some varsity games, what part is the most enjoyable for you? Like you've said before, you've started to do some 3-person varsity games, and you're working with good officials and good teams. What's been the funnest part for you, or the most fun, I should say?
I'd say the most enjoyable part of 3-person officiating is when it all comes together and your rotations are smooth. So I'll explain that for our listeners out there. When the ball is below a certain area on a certain side or something, every official seems to have a different way of rotating and stuff like that. But regardless, when it all is seamless, when you don't notice the officials are moving, that's it. It all clicks. Like it's all clicking at that spot. That's super enjoyable. I actually had my first moment of that at the Marshfield camp. I was actually working with Kent and another official during a game, and it clicked, and I was like, wow, like this is awesome. This is that was a wow moment for me. Like I fell in love with it at that exact spot. Other than that, the friendships, I love meeting new people. I tend to talk too much at times. So meeting people and resourcing and stuff like that. Last night I worked with 2 other officials, and one of them already has me connected with someone who assigns games up towards Green Bay. So I love that a lot. I love the ability to work as a crew. In aviation, we talk about it. It's called CRM, which is crew resource management. First officer and the captain work hand in hand to make a crew. And in officiating, you have the same thing. You may have someone who isn't as good of a play caller, but knows the rule book. I mean, everything in the rule book, everything in the case book, that's an asset to the crew, and that makes the crew that much better. So, yeah.
So something really cool, Rory, is when I was in the Air Force in the 90s, I joined the Air Force when I was a junior in high school on a split option, which is kind of a neat way for the Air Force to recruit people while they were still in high school. And I helped create our CRM for our unit. So crew resource management was just becoming a thing at that point, because we can't operate in a silo when you're on an airplane. And obviously, that because when you get in an airplane, there's a minimum of 2 people, a pilot, co-pilot. So you have to have a pregame, and you have your checklist, which is kind of like the official's manual. And then you have your post game, which that has a lot of crossover for you. So what's motivating about officiating for you? What makes you want to do this? It's a hard job, right? You got to balance a lot of things. You're striving for a perfect game. What's the carrot for you?
The desire to be great at something that's very difficult. If I could answer that in one sentence, that's what it would be.
It's a great answer.
I like to do things that are difficult. Aviation in itself has been an absolute challenge to me. I don't like to read, but aviation and officiating both have rule books that you got to follow, and they're pretty lengthy and they're written in small text. There's not a lot of pictures. So
Yeah,
yeah.
you needs to be a good reader.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
And it's a skill that I've been working on. And along with my first few years here studying aviation, I've worked on that, and getting into the rule book's been a little bit easier after working on those skills. So yeah. If I could touch, I guess, yeah, you go ahead, Kent.
No, I was going to get on to my next question, but I feel like you had a good point coming on, so you can go ahead.
Oh, I mean, other than that, watching NCAA basketball, those guys are smooth. You know, I went to a UW Oshkosh game last week, and I was, impressed beyond belief with the crisp of their mechanics, their movements, the confidence, all of it. Other than that, my friends that I've met at the Marsh Youth Camp that Brian hosts, they motivate me beyond belief. You know, they don't know it, but listening to this, they will know it. They don't even have to tell me anything. I just see it in their actions. You know, they're in the rule book, they're doing this, they're doing that, and they want to be great, and I want to be great as well. So that's what I got.
And that's awesome to hear. And like we said at the beginning, people put a lot of time into this, and there's lots of different things that you have to go through in order to just be able to do a game, let alone do it well. So that's awesome to hear. So Rory, you're, like we had said, you're just starting off, and the fact that you're giving all this feedback at 19, I think it just is awesome. It blows my mind that you're only 19 years old and know all of these different things back and forth, but you're also flying a plane. So I know you're able to handle a lot of that stuff. So Brad kind of touched on, like, you know, you're at a growing point. You're just starting doing varsity. You're learning a lot of that major stuff. I guess what have you grown in the most? I know you talked about doing 3-person, but is there like a certain rule that you maybe learned that really opened your eyes to, you know, you might have said, wow, I've never thought of that way before, like through an official's eyes. And then do you think there's a rule that you've learned like that the common basketball fan might have a misconception about? It's kind of a lengthy question, but
no, it's all good. I think we could go on about the fan misconceptions. My bad.
Yeah.
I think we could go on about the fan misconceptions for days, but we don't need to do that.
Hey, Kent, he did say he likes challenging things, so
that is true. You know what I mean, though? Like,
right.
Did you learn something that you took a step back and it's like, man, I've never thought of it that way before?
In particular, honestly, I just recently came to the conclusion that, well, this is rule specific, but you know, you can pivot. Once your pivot's established, you can pick up your pivot, but only under a few circumstances. And one of those is not for a dribble. So that's kind of something I'm working on, you know, right now. When I do club games and stuff like that. So once your pivot foot comes up, you can pass the ball, you can shoot the ball, or you can request a timeout. And just recently, I popped back into the rule book because I saw something. And I was like, oh, you can't start a dribble. So, I mean, that's a misconception in itself, but a lot of people don't even think you can pick up your pivot foot. You know, you hear that just coming from the crowd. A player makes a great legal step through. And this leads right into my misconception. A player makes a great basketball move, steps through, scores the basket, and all you hear is just players, coaches, and fans scream and travel. Legal play, great play. You know, we love that for the game. We want the game to be great. So I'd say that's probably the biggest misconception. But other than that, outside of rules, I'd say a big fan misconception is that I think a lot of people don't think officials are real people. We don't have jobs outside of officiating.
We teleport to the game, right?
Yeah. We just all of a sudden, boom, there they are.
Yeah, like the Jetsons.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'd say that's probably the biggest misconception. A lot of traveling rules. There's a lot of fouling rules saying, oh, straight up, oh, well, you can't be moving into a defender, an offensive player while you're maintaining verticality and whatnot. So yeah.
That's so funny that you bring up the pivot thing. So I'm a math teacher, speaking of jobs outside of reffing. And I actually used that in one of my math lessons today. So we're talking about, different shapes, and you have to use properties of the shape in order to make an equation, and so like parallelograms, rectangles, they have all different properties, and you got to use that in order to make an equation. So like when you make a call, you got to use the properties of, the action, or like a travel. You have to use the properties. If it meets the criteria, then you can call a travel. And so I use that. So it's just interesting that you bring up the same example.
Hey, Kent, quit being a square.
Do I meet the criteria?
Hey, after the podcast, we're gonna have pizza.
Hopefully it gets here.
Yeah. Rory, obviously lots of young people. Our hope is that they're gonna follow, kind of in the footsteps that you've kind of taken. And if they do that, we'll have a pipeline and a talent pool, very similar to, airlines are recruiting pilots, school districts are recruiting teachers, and, Quick Trip's recruiting a talent pool. I mean, they haven't even finished building the Quick Trip in the Dells yet. They just got the trusses on, and they already have a sign out front that they're doing interviews. And they have a kiosk that they put it right out by that sign, and it must be battery powered or something. And people can go right to the kiosk and they can do an interview online. I mean, it's amazing the things that they do to be great. And I just hope that some officials are inspired by this and want to take a chance, because you got to take a risk to officiate. And we can help officials. We can help them with uniforms. We can help them with costs of, being a member of the WIA. We can help them with, getting them connected to associations. So what advice would you give to somebody who's considering being an official that maybe is on the fence? There's a senior in every high school that is going to be at the end of the basketball season. They're going to have their banquet, and they're going to cry or maybe be sad because, basketball is now over, but it isn't. For all of them, they could be referees and then can continue serving the game. So what do you think about that, Rory? What would you say?
Yeah, Brian, I like how you touched on serving the game. You're still a part of the game. You're not a player, but you're still out there and you still get to experience the emotions because you do as an official. My advice for young officials, if you're on the fence about it, start at a young level. Go for it though. We see all officials make mistakes. So the worst thing you're going to do is make a mistake. If you have friends or, a friend's parent that officiates, talk to them. We're not going to tell you don't do it. If I'm telling you don't do it, I'm not the right guy to talk to. And I know I would never turn away an official who wants to get into officiating. I never did this, but looking back into high school, I should have gone to a local game and talked to the varsity or the JV officials before or after. As simple as that. They'll get you hooked up. And like you also mentioned, if financials are an issue, more than happy. I know you guys, anyone in the WROA is more than happy to help cover that and get you started. At least get a base under. Yeah,
and Larry Dietz from over in the Green Bay area has a great program where it's kind of a mutual respect thing. Officials can give Larry their old gear when they're on the way out, and then Larry can turn around and give it to officials who are maybe on their way in. It's kind of neat. It's almost like one of those little community boxes where you could have food or books, where you can take a book, leave a book, take some food, leave some food. Larry has a really good thing going. So kudos to Larry Dietz from over in the Green Bay area for having I kind of call it the lending lab, where he'll ship stuff to you You can go on his website, and we'll try to maybe see if we can do a podcast with Larry down the road to promote what he's doing to serve officials. Is anything else you want to say, Rory, as we depart the airplane? You didn't laugh. You didn't laugh at my joke.
My bad. I was supposed to laugh. That was a good one. Depart the plane. Got you. Depart the runway. All this. Clean it up after. Anyways,
we're shutting her down. We're shutting her down.
Yeah, we're shutting it down. Now we got to do a whole checklist. That's going to take 15 more minutes.
We don't have 15 more minutes.
No, I know. Yeah, just go for it. Talk to other people. We need officials. Go for it. Talk to people that you know that officiate. They're going to help you out. And if you make mistakes, you know what? Everyone makes mistakes. It is what it is. You just learn from them. That's what separates the people that continue to go and then the people that quit. Learn from your mistakes. Be great. That's all I got.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Rory. And this will conclude our first episode of the And One podcast. And I can't believe we're in almost to the middle of December already. And it seems like the season just started, but teams are starting to get conference play now and starting to heat up, which is an exciting time for officials. And we just hope that people stay safe and healthy, and we can just keep getting more young officials to referee. We're going to be in a good place. So have a great night, everyone.
Yep. You guys take care. Thanks for having me on.